right, let's check in with TSN hockey analyst Dave Poulin. Lots to get to right now. Poulin, how are you?
I don't know. That's how I answered during the pandemic. Man, what a weekend. What a 5-6 days of hockey, guys. It's been incredible. It really has. There's been a lot to digest, a lot in the respective markets. And guys, maybe none more so than in your market.
Man, there's been a lot to talk about around this Winnipeg Jets team since Game 5, Poulin.
There was a lot all year because we essentially saw two different teams in three different parts. The team that started the year and played 55 games or whatever and was in first place in the Central and was a tremendous story. And then it went sideways and couldn't get it back on track. And then late got it back on track in such a positive manner that there was a lot of positive energy heading into the playoffs. And even through, obviously the start of the playoffs and even through the comeback game in which you win that game in overtime, we might be having a different conversation right now. And then it went really sideways at the end. And it could really, in some ways, flash back even beyond this year at the end to what had plagued the team through some of the portions of last season.
Well, I mean, listen, we don't need to spend too much time talking about Game 5 because, frankly, there's not much to say. It was an effort that drove the coach nuts, quite obviously. And what I think for people that have followed this team for such a long time is that it was deja vu of, Game 6 against St. Louis in 2019 and Game 4 against Montreal, where the teams with their backs against the wall, just absolutely no response. And, to use our Bonesism, no pushback. Well, what was your first reaction when you heard Bones erupt the way he did after Game 5?
My first reaction is there's a waiting period before coaches speak after games, and it wasn't long enough. I have part of my role with the Leafs with both Randy Carlyle and Ron Wilson was meeting them right post game. And essentially we had a little bit more of a window, and particularly at home when the visiting team would go first, to really try and get things calmed down. It's hard to fathom for someone that hasn't witnessed it, but to sit across the desk from those two gentlemen for the better part of 5 years, to be a coach myself for 10 years, albeit at a very different level, it still involved the same human emotions that a coach has. And there's a reason that Rick Bowness has been successful for as long as he has, and it's because he takes things personally. He lives the game of hockey. He doesn't just coach the game of hockey. And it couldn't have been more evident because it's personal when you have messaged a group for the period of time that he has, in the manner that he has, and seen so much success, even in the last year, percentage-wise of the number of games, and yet have something like that happen at the most crucial time. So that's where the emotion comes from, guys. It's personal. It's hard to understand if you've never stood in the shoes or sat in the seat, but he's the ultimate top end of it. And it's not the assistant coaches. It's not, the video guys. It's not the supporting crew. It's Rick Bowness. He's the head coach. It says so right on the game sheet, and he wears it. And that's why he's good. And that's why you get an emotion like you got after Game 5.
Well, and to be honest, Dave, we see it in the Winnipeg Sports Talk chat and everyone that's commenting on the shows. It was well received by the fans because, frankly, it was very similar to what was happening at bar tops and living rooms around Winnipeg after seeing that game. And, even preceding Rick being here, what we've seen before, in elimination games from this hockey club. But what was very interesting about it was that he referenced, what had happened in January and February. It was quite clear that this was an eruption that was sort of building. And I'm interested in your perspective on what that says about, where this team is right now heading into the offseason and next year, because I think it's quite clear to anyone paying attention that certainly the head coach feels that there's probably some changes that need to be made or a different way of doing things for a group that's been together, at least this core, for a pretty significant period of time.
Essentially what you've done, you've accelerated the summer. That's what you've done. You know, a lot of teams have a hard time identifying what their issues were. And it appears that the issues have been identified. They're inside that room. So now the brain trust gets together and the management group and the coaching group and go through in detail exactly what was said, but not stated, if that's the correct way to put it. You know, you don't. Now, guys, if this had happened over the next week or two, I was just surprised by the timing with Rick. That's what I was surprised by. Not that this is going to happen, but that the timing of it right after the game, it was bubbling so hard that he couldn't carry it into the next few days.
Poulin, we were down at the rink on Saturday hearing from the players in the annual Garbage Day, media addresses before they hit the road.
Garbage bag, I believe, not garbage day.
Yeah. Good point. Garbage bag day.
We're leaving with the banners.
Locker cleanout. And, we heard it right off the bat from Blake Wheeler, who said that he was disappointed. I believe the quote was with the way Rick conducted himself. We heard a number of other players that expressed frustration with the fact that was aired out there. The one thing that we really didn't hear from anybody, which I think probably would have gone a long way, was that, hey, listen, we understand that Rick's an emotional guy. We didn't like what we heard of it, but owning a little bit of Game 5, which wasn't there. What do you take away from that? I mean, does that tell us something about the mental makeup of the Winnipeg Jets hockey club, but the way the players reacted to it without anyone really standing up and saying, listen, we didn't like it, but I can kind of understand it considering what had happened in game number 5.
Well, it's embarrassing for them, Andrew. That's what it is. And they know. When I'm sitting in the locker room, I know. And there were times, in thinking of my leadership role in Philadelphia and in Boston, there were times where when you have a players only meeting, everyone knows what to say because they've heard it in other meetings. And there were times when I would say, I'd meet with the leadership team and I'd say, we're in a players only meeting, but guess what? I don't want to hear what you have to say because I don't believe it. And you can say that in a closed door room. And I don't want to hear you stand up and go through the rhetoric of, we have to work harder, we have to do this, we have to do that. It's deeper than that. And that's the personal side of it for the players. That's why arguably you didn't hear that, is because it's embarrassing to them. And they are being called out in a very public fashion. And there's a responsibility to playing the game at a high level, to being one of the leaders is just that. You have to be one of the leaders and you have to take charge of that room. And it doesn't sound like that happened in a proper fashion. It may have, and there may have been a split at the top in the room. And I think that will come out. But what is assured is that you're not running the same team back out there next September. I mean, there's assured. And then guess what? You're going to have some trade partners out there because there's other teams that have been through the same thing, maybe not quite as publicly, but have had the same disappointments. And there may be teams, I mean, right off the top of your head, there may be a team in New York right now this morning that does have the same issues. We don't know that. It hasn't come out. But when you see a team disappoint that's capable, you know there are other underlying factors. That's where this is. And there are underlying factors with individuals because that's what a hockey team is. You can't say it's something, I don't even know what. Well, the travel wasn't great or the food wasn't great. It's not those things. It's the play of the players. That's what it ultimately comes down to, is the play of the players. And when you don't perform at the level that you're capable of and that you are demanding yourself, it's embarrassing, Andrew.
Bones, after the players spoke, and I don't even want to say he walked it back. I mean, I think he tried to turn the temperature down a little bit by saying, maybe his choice of words disgusted, maybe was a little bit over the top. But he was very clear that he stands behind the message of what he said. And then bringing all of that to Sunday when we heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff, and Chevy spoke for a long time. I mean, as he is often to do, kind of danced around a lot of the meat of what had been asked of him. But I mean, as someone that's been an executive before, Dave, talk to me about Cheveldayoff's position right now. And, the fact that I think most people know and assume that there will be some significant moves. Keeping in mind the challenges of being the GM in Winnipeg. I mean, trades aren't as easy to be made here as other spots. We get that. But while he didn't say it on Sunday, what do you think is going on inside that GM's office in the management meetings when they are pushing ahead for what will undoubtedly be, or should at least be, a crucial couple of months leading into the draft for a team that, even if they don't want to move on, some guys are frankly going to be forced to do that, it looks like, if they can't get extensions done?
Well, as I mentioned, a lot of their work has been done for them by Rick in that presser. As tough as the timing was and everything else, I mean, they clearly have identified some of the issues. Now you've got to address them. That's the challenge. You've got to address them. And it does seem overwhelming because, you're likely talking some significant players here, but there are very good players traded in the National Hockey League every year. And for a variety of reasons, some of it is just defined term. Some of it is simply that they've been there a long time and it's flat out time for change. And you think by changing some of the pieces around that's going to change the environment of the locker room, and sometimes it doesn't. The mix of what the group is incredibly important. The mix right now doesn't appear to be correct. And that's defined by their play. That's defined by what the coach's read is on them. And that's defined by the result, because it wasn't good enough.